On this episode, Charged and Disbarred.
This went on for 14 years. He obviously figured out a crack in the system. All totaled, the bill was $5.5 million in fraudulent invoices. Ultimately, it was that power that caused his demise.
He'd stolen somewhere between $2 to $8 million from his clients. He started this conduct in 2003 and continued until 2008, but it wasn't discovered until some years later. What's wrong with the system?
Judges and attorneys are like kings and knights in their own realm. It is unthinkable that in a moment of madness it can all be thrown away. Charged and Disbarred explores the true life stories of attorneys who have fallen from grace. Hear firsthand accounts from the victims, detectives, and prosecutors who brought these disgraced attorneys to justice. This is Charged and Disbarred.
In the late 1800s, Lord Acton proclaimed, "Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Great men are almost always bad men. When power goes unchecked, it becomes dangerous, even leading to self-destruction." Jason Throne was 32 when he joined mega corporation Hunter Douglas in 1993. The ambitious young attorney was on the fast track to the top of the corporate ladder.
I'm Michael McCabe. I am an attorney in Baltimore, Maryland. I've been practicing law since 1992. I represent attorneys around the country who are involved in attorney disbarment and disciplinary proceedings, as well as law firms who have trouble with attorneys. So Jason Throne is an interesting guy. He was a patent attorney, became a patent attorney around 1990. Soon after he started his legal career, he began working for a company called Hunter Douglas, which is very well known for window coverings and a very successful business. During his time at Hunter Douglas, Mr. Throne became more and more responsible for the operations of the intellectual property group at Hunter Douglas.
Mr. Throne made quite an impression on his superiors at Hunter Douglas, and quickly moved up the ranks, culminating in the ultimate coronation.
Around 2000, he became actually the chief intellectual property counsel for the entire company. This gave Mr. Throne significant power and authority within the company.
As chief counsel for Hunter Douglas, Jason Throne was responsible for all of the company's intellectual property. At a company as big as Hunter Douglas, this meant Throne yielded a lot of power. But with great power comes even greater responsibility.
Ultimately, it was that power that caused his demise.
Mr. Throne enjoyed many perks, a big salary, and a home office in his native Colorado. He even held patents on over 40 of the multi-billion-dollar company's products. But Jason Throne was compelled towards something more.
So what happened to Jason Throne is that he apparently felt that he was not making enough money in his position and decided to supplement his income by first creating a fictitious company that was going to be a vendor for patent services that were provided to the Hunter Douglas company. And that company was formed by Mr. Throne, and it was a complete fraud. The company didn't provide any services at all, but it was supposed to provide patent searching services for Hunter Douglas.
Patent searches are vital to Hunter Douglas's business. They help determine if a product already exists and if a patent is available. While it's tedious work, a patent search helps prevent future lawsuits and in the end can potentially save a lot of money. It's incumbent upon the patent attorney to make sure those searches are done thoroughly and accurately.
And those patent-related searches were supposed to go to Mr. Throne himself. So Mr. Throne set up a company to provide fake patent searches. The company then provided fake patent searches to Mr. Throne himself. And most importantly, the company provided invoices to Hunter Douglas. Now, who did you think approved the invoices for patent services and the patent searches? Mr. Throne himself, because he was high enough in the organization that he had the authority to approve the invoices.
No one thought to question those illicit activities. The buck stopped at Throne.
And this went on for 14 years. For 14 years, Mr. Throne would receive and approve monthly invoices that were complete fictions. He created the invoices, submitted the invoices under the guise of being the patent search company. He would authorize the invoices for payment, and the patent search company would get paid. Now, since Mr. Throne had formed the patent search company, he had access to the patent search company's bank accounts. And what he would do then is, once the money would be paid on a monthly basis from Hunter Douglas to the patent search company, he would then transfer that money from the fictitious company and transfer it into his own personal bank account.
Armed only with invoices and a P.O. box, Jason Throne robbed Hunter Douglas and didn't even have to fire a single shot.
The billing by the fictitious company occurred on a monthly basis, and it would range typically from anywhere between $20,000 and $40,000 to $50,000 each month. Every month for 14 years.
Hunter Douglas is worth nearly $3 billion. With its headquarters in the Netherlands, the company has over 16,000 employees in over 100 countries. $50,000 per month was just a drop in the bucket.
Incredibly, over the course of this entire fraudulent scheme, no one was wise to it. No one questioned the expenses of the $20,000 to $30,000 or $40,000 that were being spent every month for these patent searches. On paper, these seemed to be reasonable expenses that were a normal course of business, a normal part of what the patent department would do for Hunter Douglas. And in addition to that, Mr. Throne was a senior management person who had gained significant trust at Hunter Douglas. So no one questioned either his request for these services or whether those services were ever provided, and no one ever questioned the bills. Mr. Throne would simply sign off on approving the bills. He would submit the approved invoices to accounting, and accounting would pay.
After all, Jason Throne was one of the most powerful people at Hunter Douglas.
The only way that Jason Throne could have gotten away for this period of time, for this extent of fraudulent activity, was that there was literally no oversight over him.
Good corporate governance requires a system of checks and balances. Financial audits, separate departments and functions, all are designed to limit the power of one individual. How then was Jason Throne able to perpetrate this fraud for so long?
It's mind-boggling that a company of the size and the significance of Hunter Douglas would be in a situation where someone in senior management could pull this off. But Jason Throne had been with the company for a number of years before he got into the position of power that he was. And he obviously figured out a crack in the system. He figured out that there was no checks and balances and was able to approve these fraudulent invoices and get these invoices paid without anyone in the company ever raising a single question. How did this all come to an end? In the end of 2013, there was a budget that was presented that was reviewed by certain members in the patent department at Hunter Douglas. And one of the employees in the patent department, who was actually a subordinate to Mr. Throne, noted that there was all this money being spent on patent searches. Something like $400,000 to $500,000 in the past year had been spent on patent searches. Now, when this employee raised the issue with Mr. Throne assured her that there was nothing improper, that the company was existing and it did provide all of these services. And so he thought that he was able to elude suspicion in that manner.
Jason Throne's empire came tumbling down because of one relentless underling.
The issue didn't go away, and apparently the person who spotted this fraud, what wasn't known to be a fraud at the time, but apparently this person reported it to others in management. And in 2014, things began to unfold when certain other people in the management of Hunter Douglas investigated the particulars of the patent search company. And what they discovered was that the patent search company was formed by Jason Throne's wife.
Suddenly, Mary Throne found herself thrust into the spotlight.
So that immediately raised some significant red flags about internal conflicts of interest at the very least. When Mr. Throne was approached by the senior management about what was going on, Mr. Throne then turned around and assured the company that yes, his wife was in charge of the company, but that she was in fact a great patent searcher and she was doing all of this work for the company. But that didn't really fly very well with Hunter Douglas. They found no evidence or indicia that Mrs. Throne had done anything. And at that point in time, the gig was up and Mr. Throne was caught.
Hunter Douglas contacted the authorities and an investigation was launched. The evidence against Mr. Throne was so compelling that there was little room for denial. The once powerful attorney who perpetrated a multi-million-dollar fraud upon his client for over a decade found himself in handcuffs, facing one of his peers. His wife, Mary, was also accused of defrauding Hunter Douglas.
So it turned out that Mrs. Throne didn't have any experience at all in the patent searching field or anything to do with patents. In fact, she was an aerobics instructor.
Jason Throne himself had set up the fake patent search company in his wife's name, and he alone was collecting the payments from Hunter Douglas. Charges against Mrs. Throne were eventually dropped. Jason Throne was not so lucky.
Well, once it was finally discovered, Mr. Throne was fired. He was subsequently arrested and indicted for the theft from the company. All totaled, the bill was $5.5 million in fraudulent invoices that had been paid to Jason Throne. And so he was charged for that fraud. In addition, he was also charged with tax evasion because he didn't pay taxes on the $5.5 million that he stole from the company. So in 2016, Mr. Throne pleaded guilty to the theft from his company, as well as the amount of money that he stole.
Gone was the lavish lifestyle and high society living that he fought for and stole to achieve. At the time of his sentencing, Jason Throne worked as a sales associate at a home improvement supply company to make ends meet. Not quite the posh surroundings he'd become accustomed to.
Mr. Throne received a 6-year federal prison sentence. He was also ordered to pay $5 million in restitution. So Mr. Throne, after pleading guilty to the crimes, was also charged by the State Bar of New Hampshire as well as the Federal Bar of the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Rather than fight those charges before the disciplinary authorities, Mr. Throne resigned from both the New Hampshire State Bar as well as the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office Bar, which has the same effect as being disbarred.
Photographs or images of this attorney are no longer available to the public.
Losing his law license was particularly upsetting because as a patent lawyer, Jason Throne had to pass not just the traditional bar exam, but also the patent exam, which required a scientific or technical background.
Mr. Throne's legal career is finished.
The 56-year-old will have plenty of time to ponder the consequences of his actions behind bars and will continue to suffer for his crimes once released when he has to pay $5 million in restitution.
Yeah, Mr. Throne is likely going to have this debt hanging over his head the rest of his life. Maybe if he wins the lottery, he could pay the money back. Maybe if his wife's aerobics business takes off, they'll have the money to pay the restitution back. But as a disbarred attorney who's a federal felon, It's very limited employment options once you get out of prison.
Still to come on Charged and Disbarred.
He'd stolen somewhere between $2 to $8 million from his clients. He started this conduct in 2003 and continued until 2008, but it wasn't discovered until some years later. What's wrong with the system?
This is Charged and Disbarred.
Queensland, Australia, named in honour of Queen Victoria, who officially designated the colony separated from South Wales. Queen Victoria was Britain and Australia's second longest reigning monarch, second only to Queen Elizabeth II. Queensland is steeped in pomp and tradition. The 55th Parliament opening, for instance, was a 3-day affair complete with a march of the Australian Army Guard, followed by a 19-gun salute and the grand entrance of the Governor in a horse and carriage. While Queensland has been independent for nearly 160 years, the law firm of Crouch Linden has been in existence for almost 120 years and enjoyed a stellar reputation in Queensland until it was unexpectedly rocked by a scandal of royal proportions.
I'm Marlene Nebinger. I'm a lawyer from Werribee, Melbourne, Australia. I'm an accredited family law specialist. About 13 years ago, I took a real interest in looking at legal professional ethics. I started as a lecturer in that area and then have written many papers, delivered many lectures to lawyers across Australia and internationally, and I've written a couple of books on the topic as well. For some reason, I like reading about lawyers who do the wrong thing. And I like talking about them to make sure that lawyers remember to do the right thing and to not follow in the footsteps of those that are really bringing our profession into disrepute. I first became aware of Anthony Scott Wood when I was conducting some research for a presentation that I was going to deliver to a group of lawyers. I discovered that this 50-year-old man had really conducted himself very inappropriately. He'd stolen somewhere between $2 to $8 million from his clients. In fact, they can't work out what the exact figure is.
Anthony Scott Wood was admitted to practice law as a solicitor in 1980. He joined the firm of Crouch Linden and made a partner a few years later. By 2003, however, Anthony Scott Wood had defrauded his first victim, taking money from the estate of a deceased client. And he didn't stop there.
I find that quite interesting. If lawyers have got a practicing certificate that allows them to hold trust money, so trust money is money that belongs to your clients. You're holding it on trust for them. So he obviously had a practicing certificate with trust. That trust account, by law, must be audited at least once a year. If there's any sniff of somebody doing something wrong with their trust account, the auditors can come in, do surprise visits. So I'm really surprised to hear that he started this conduct in 2003 and continued until 2008, but it wasn't discovered until some years later. So what's wrong with the system where there's an audit in a legal practice of their trust account every year and nobody's picked up that this man, Mr. Wood, has stolen somewhere between $2 and $8 million?
Anthony Scott Wood was a trusted family man who was married for a number of years. He was a partner of one of the oldest, most respected law firms in Queensland, and as such was above suspicion.
Mr. Wood clearly abused his position of power. He was entrusted with millions of dollars of his clients' money. He stole that money. He was calculated about it. He misappropriated so much money. He set up loans, fraudulent loans, to be able to pay back the money that he'd stolen from clients. He just became involved in this web of taking money from this one to pay that one. When I read some of these cases or hear about these lawyers who are acting unethically, it really makes me feel quite unwell and pretty angry, really. As a lawyer, we're audited. I have to attend compulsory professional development. I have to maintain my reputation. If I don't maintain my reputation, I'm going to have a pretty poor business. I'm not going to have clients who are going to come to me. My whole business is running on reputation.
Becoming a solicitor is no small feat. In addition to law school, there is a rigorous process before getting the honor to be part of this exclusive club.
Prior to being admitted as a lawyer, you have to prove that you're a fit and proper person. So you have to do things like have criminal record checks, even down to speeding tickets. Any dishonesty cases, you have to disclose. So you need to fess up. You need to say, I'm a decent person. However, I might have had this past. If you do that, you jump through the hoops, you become admitted as a lawyer after you've done all of your training. Once you're admitted as a lawyer, you can't actually practice unless you hold a practicing certificate. You have to be admitted and you have to have a practicing certificate. There are many cases where people hold out to be lawyers who don't have a practicing certificate, or lawyers who had a practicing certificate but failed to repay.
Once admitted to the practice of law, a solicitor's actions are governed by a set of rules for professional conduct.
We are then governed by a Legal Profession Act. In Victoria and New South Wales, it's called the Uniform Law Act. In other states, it's still called the Legal Profession Act. So every state and territory has their own laws. So they have a law, an Act of Parliament, they have rules, they also have guidelines, they have ethical standards. But there are solicitor rules and there are barrister rules that you have to comply with.
In Australia, the legal profession has barristers and solicitors. A barrister's role is primarily advocacy, going to court on your behalf and filing pleadings. A solicitor gives counsel and guidance to clients.
They have professional development rules. We are very regulated as a profession. We were regulated in Victoria by our peer group, the Law Institute. But the law changed some years ago and we have an independent commissioner who sits with a board called the Legal Services Board, and we have the Legal Services Commissioner. People can make complaints to the commissioner and the commissioner then has to investigate those complaints. There are a number of lawyers who have complaints made against them who fail to respond to the commissioner. They're the lawyers that tend to keep getting into trouble.
Over the course of 5 years, Anthony Scott Wood lived the golden life, violating his clients' trust and lining his pockets with their money. Pretty soon, things spiraled out of control and was exposed after a routine audit of the firm's finances.
No, that money will never get recovered. I mean, people can apply for compensation orders. You know, I don't know Mr. Wood's case, but I'd say he got a 10-year sentence, so I'm pretty sure he doesn't have any money left. So where are those clients going to recoup their money from?
The sentencing judge acknowledged that Anthony Scott Wood was taking money from one client and then from another to pay the first, which snowballed into an avalanche. The judge deemed Anthony Scott Wood's conduct the worst of this type of offense. He was sent to jail and suffered the ultimate humiliation for any attorney, losing his license to practice.
Photographs or images of this attorney are no longer available to the public.
When he was struck off the roll, he actually agreed that his conduct was misconduct, and he received the highest penalty that you can receive, which was 10-year imprisonment. He's still in prison, as I understand, today. He brought the profession, in Queensland in particular, he would have been well known in that firm, into disrepute. He'd taken people's money. He stole $200,000 from a deceased estate for his own needs. In fact, nobody really ever knows what those needs were, with no excuse other than he was a crook, nothing more than a thief. Mr. Wood received a 10-year sentence for his conduct. He's lost his livelihood, he's lost his reputation, he's stolen millions from his clients. He gets 10 years imprisonment and he gets struck off the roll of lawyers. When he comes out, who knows what he'll be.
It's It's not every day that a lawyer goes to prison in Queensland, especially not one as powerful as Anthony Scott Wood.
So lawyers every year have to reapply for their practicing certificate. Of course, there's a fee that goes with that application. First, you have to prove that you are still a fit and proper person to hold the title as an Australian lawyer. You pay a fee. Part of that fee is for what we call the Fidelity Fund. The Fidelity Fund's been set up by the various regulatory bodies across the country to assist clients who have either their money, their trust money, or their property stolen by a lawyer. So good lawyers are paying a fee every year when they reapply for their practicing certificate that goes into a Fidelity Fund to pay for the misdeeds of unethical and unprofessional lawyers. In this case of Mr. Wood, this was all trust money. All the money stolen was trust money. They were only able to pay $1.245 million back to clients. Yet we know there was a minimum of $2 million and most likely $8 million stolen from clients.
Anthony Scott Wood's wife divorced him shortly after his sentencing. He was given 10 years in jail, but was eligible for release just 3 short years later.
I think justice was served for Mr. Wood. I think when he got struck off the roll in Queensland, he didn't object. He understood that his conduct was professional misconduct. And what else was there to do other than to strike him off the roll of legal practitioners and go to jail? I don't know whether Mr. Wood was a bad person. Other than reading about his case, I know nothing about him, so I can't comment. But what I probably would say, confidently, is that he was a terrible lawyer because he stole from his clients.